Welcome back, and of course, we are still live on BECE, on YouTube, on Facebook, and of course, on manjoonline.com. This is the pause. Now, President Mahama says recent gains by the Ghanaian cedi have helped the country reduce its total debt burden by almost 150 billion cedis. Now, he says if the trajectory continues, the target of reaching 55 to 58% debt sustainability by 2028 will be reached by the end of the year. Now, speaking during a presidential session at the 60th annual meeting of the African Development Bank and the 51st annual meeting of the African Development Fund in Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire, he credited the debt reduction to key interventions rolled out by his government over the past 5 months. He says his government is also focused on boosting domestic revenue, fighting corruption, citing wasteful government expenditure, and ensuring better accountability in governance.
It's our bilateral creditors, and therefore it brought, one, the quantum of debt down, that's the size, but it also stretched out the repayment of the debt. That brought us down to about 75, 76% debt to GDP. Since then, we're left with just 3% of the debt. We've covered 97%. It's left with the commercial creditors who hold just about 3% of the debt. And once we do that, then it means that the whole debt restructuring has been completed. But like I said when I spoke at first, I said we need to put any credit that we take or any debt that we take into the most productive parts of our economy in providing infrastructure so that you can have a rate of return on debt. You must do smart borrowing, taking debt where you can create debt escrows so that the income for which you invested the credit can go to repay. For instance, expressways that are tolled, where the toll revenues are escrowed so that they go to pay the expressway in 25 years or so. I think that these are the kinds of things that we should do. There are many examples. For instance, we built a first-class port, and that, again, did not sit on our public debt. We made our Ghana Ports and Harbours Authority and their partners, Meridian Port Services, build the ports, which cost us about $1 billion, and that port is paying for itself, and that debt does not sit on our books. We built a new airport terminal we call Terminal 3, and again, we built it on the balance sheet of the Ghana Airports Company Limited. And so that project is paying for itself without sitting on our public debt. And so these are some of the innovative ideas that we need to introduce in order that our debts continue to be sustainable. But also, increasingly, one of the push factors for the debt is the strength of the value of the local currency. Our debt continued to multiply because the cedi continued to grow weaker. And so you needed more cedis. Because our public debt is stated in cedis, the weaker the cedi becomes against the foreign currencies, the higher it pushes up your debt. Fortunately, some measures we put in place have recently begun to show results, and the cedi has been strengthening. And so we've reduced our total debt over the last 5 months by almost 150 billion cedis, which is very significant. And so if that trajectory continues, the target of reaching 55 to 58% debt sustainability by 2028 will be reached by the end of this year. And that means that it gives us fiscal space to begin to invest in the most productive sectors of the economy. But like I said, we need to look inward, boost domestic revenue, cut wasteful government expenditure, fight corruption, and introduce better accountability in governance. And that is what the focus of my administration.
Well, President Obama also talked about the progress made in the local processing of Ghana's cocoa. He said the country has now reached about 40% in domestic cocoa processing and expressed optimism that Ghana could match or surpass Cote d'Ivoire's 50% processing benchmark within the next 4 to 5 years.
You notice that the World Economic Order is rigged against Africa. We can increase processing overnight, but you have non-tariff barriers in exporting into some of the markets. Unless they bring a processor from outside, from Europe who comes and sets up a processing plant and gets all the regulatory things in place. I mean, an indigenous person setting up a processing plant sometimes has a very big difficulty exporting finished products into the EU market and into the American market. But I must say that we've made progress from a low of about 25% processed cocoa. Ghana has risen to about 40%, and I know Cote d'Ivoire is ahead of us. Cote d'Ivoire has done 50%, which is comfortable. And so 50% of Cote d'Ivoire's cocoa is processed domestically. Ghana is at 40%. We hope that over the next 4 or 5 years, we'll reach the stage of Cote d'Ivoire at 50% and push even further.
Thank you very much, President Mahama. We'll go next to Vice President Mpango. Your country has invested.
So that's President John Mahama in that ongoing board meeting of the Africa Development Bank and other matters relating to that. Now let's talk about education, because in a significant policy shift aimed at expanding access to secondary education and easing congestion in senior high schools, government has announced that private senior high schools will now be included in the government-free senior high school program as part of efforts to fulfill the campaign promise. The Deputy Education Minister, Dr. Clement Park, during a news briefing on these new guidelines for school selection for BECE candidates, said the inclusion of the private sector into the senior high school program is a strategic move to reduce the pressure on schools now and to support the eventual phasing out of the controversial double-track system.
Let me state that as part of our campaign promise, we have been working very, very diligently to bring on board private senior high schools to participate in the delivery of the free senior high school program. Meetings have been held, engagements have been done, and we are very certain that with the diligence that we expect from our side and the eagerness of the private schools to participate, the private schools would deliver in their participation. We believe very strongly that in fulfilling this manifesto campaign promise, this is going to serve as an artery in helping us bring an end to what we all describe as the obnoxious double-track system.
And again, the Ministry of Education has reinstated the practice of school selection prior to the BECE, with the 2025 exams fully commencing today, Tuesday, May 27, and scheduled to end on Friday, June 6, 2025. Now, in recent years, this policy had been abandoned, requiring students or candidates to choose their preferred senior high schools after writing the BECE. However, during a news briefing on the updated guidelines, coordinator of the Free Senior High School Secretariat, Sana Okitidua, announced a return to the pre-exam selection process and urged parents to take key interest in their award school selection.
Indicated by the Honorable Deputy Minister, Honorable Clement Park, the 2025 Basic Education Certificate Examination BECE candidates will be undergoing the school selection exercise. This all-important activity is starting today, Tuesday, 27th May, and ends Friday, 6th June 2025. Teams of officers from the Ghana Education Service, Ghana TVET Service, and Free Senior High School Secretariat have been deployed to various regions to begin sensitization of candidates, parents, and guardians, and the general public to the 2025 school selection guidelines. Our friends from the media, the public relation officers of the Ministry of Education, Ghana Education Service, and Ghana TV Service have also been deployed to undertake media engagements in the same regard. Ladies and gentlemen, please let's take note of the following modifications in the 2025 school selection process. Candidates who wish to enter SHS TVET schools must, with guidance from parents, guardians, and school authorities, select 7 schools in total, 5 main and 2 alternatives. Your 5 main schools should be ranked in order of preference, with the first being the most preferred choice. Your 2 alternatives should be selected from Appendix 3 for consideration, if not placed in any of your 5 main choices. Select programs and residential preferences for each of the schools: 3 boarding and 2 day. Candidates may select 1 Category B school as boarding and another Category B school as day. Candidates may also select 1 Category C school as boarding and another Category C school as day. Please note that candidates placed in any of their choices will not be changed. And I emphasize on that, will not be changed. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, also note that candidates cannot choose more than 1 from Category A. Candidates cannot select more than 2 schools from Category B. Candidates may select all 5 schools from Category C, 3 boarding, 2 day. As our Honorable Deputy said earlier, we have a lot of good schools in the Category C. They have all the facilities, and we need to make good use of them. So we are encouraging parents to look at the Category C column and choose schools for their children from the Category C. Candidates who wish to offer pure TVET programs must select 5 TVET institutions from Category A, B, C, using the same selection criteria as indicated earlier, as day or boarding. Candidates who wish to offer program choices about future job prospects, such as engineers, physicians, astronauts, etc., must select STEM sciences in all 5 choices from Category A, B, C as day or boarding.
All right, so that's some kind of elaborate plan for the BECE and those who are seeking to enter the senior high school. Let's put this to some analysis. Joining me for a conversation is the Executive Director of the Africa Education Watch, Mr. Kofi Asare. Mr. Asare, always a pleasure to have you. Good afternoon. And of course, you also got the General Secretary of the Ghana National Association of Private Schools, Mr. Justice Ken Isel. Mr. Isel, good afternoon. Right. If you can unmute for me, Mr. Justice, but let me start with you, Mr. Kofi Asare. So you heard the Free Senior High School coordinator, telling us what BECE candidates are expected to do regarding their enrollment into senior high school. Now, you would do the selection before the exam instead of what existed some few months ago, that you do the selection after the exam. Is this the best way to go? I remember when I completed BECE, I did the selection before going to SSS.
Well, that was the regular system until COVID, and then we had to change to a system where students selected their schools after writing the BECE. Now, this post-COVID system had challenges. The teachers kept complaining that it was difficult to get the students to return to school, to go through the school placement process after they have finished the BECE. And so it was a bit tedious for our teachers. And so I think that it is in the best interest of ensuring that both teachers and students go through a relatively, less stressful process of school placement. The reason why we are back to where we were pre-COVID. And so it is welcome news that teachers and students and parents can collaborate in selecting schools before BECE is written, when everybody is in school. It makes it easier. That is welcome.
Is that the only thing that must change? I mean, in terms of this government approach to reforming the overall education at the basic level?
Well, in terms of that must change, I thought we were talking about the pressure and what government is doing.
Right.
Let me indicate that the 15%, the slashing of the private school protocol allocation for category A placement, the slashing of the public junior high schools 30% protocol allocation for category A schools from 30 to 15%, which the 50% slash is also commendable because the previous regime, even though it was intended to provide equity for students attending public basic schools who may not have had, good resources, learning environment compared to private schools, it ended up, appearing more as a discriminatory policy against private school students who are also Ghanaians, rather than it being an equity intervention for public school students. And so the slashing down of the protocol by half, I think, to a higher extent, mitigates that gap between implementing an equity-based policy for public schools, vis-a-vis not discriminating against private school students who are also Ghanaians and also deserve access to equal educational opportunities as provided for in the Constitution. So those two, I think, are commendable. Notwithstanding, let me quickly add that the first is that the challenges in the school placement, many of the challenges happen after the selection of schools. And so it's early days yet. We hope that the minister, the lady who was the official who addressed the media,
right, the FSHS coordinator,
will walk their talk, because the issue is about a meritorious school placement system where placement is based on merit. The issue is about the existence of corrupt practices in the school placement system where merit is relegated. That is the problem we are faced. And so the solutions or the assurances of change or resetting start with when we see that in implementing the guidelines, the ministry, the GES, CSSPS, they are all firm and ensuring that the guidelines they are provided are being diligently and implemented without fear or favor. That is the first issue. The second issue is about the governance architecture. And I'm surprised that nothing is being done. Look, in the past, the challenge we've had with the school placement system is that the governance system was quite incongruous.
Right.
And it didn't assure accountability, checks and balances. We have the Ministry of Education running the school placement system under the minister's office, for the Free Senior Secretariat responds to the minister. If the Ministry of Education is directly involved in policy implementation, who is there to exercise direct oversight? You see? And so that arrangement bled accountability. And that's why we had challenges in the past when it came to school placement, because the ministry is supposed to exercise oversight over agencies, each agency in implementing policy, rather became an implementer. So I was expecting the CSSPS to be leading this,
right?
To get assurance that something has changed. But here's the case where we are still using the Free Senior Secretariat to lead in the management of this thing. And so I think that we need to have a second look at this. Other than that, this incongruous governance arrangement will simply lead us to where we were in the past, where the Ministry of Education is a net implementer. If that happens, who is going to hold them accountable, the GES or who? So we need to have a conversation around the governance architecture of our school placement system. Other than that, we'll be limited in terms of the extent to which we can reset the system and make it more equitable, more responsive and more fair and meritorious.
The other matter I just want to pick your brains on is, the challenges with the free senior high school program, inadequate feeding, money for headmasters to take care of the students has always been an issue. Even the issue of access and facilities to accommodate them. The government says I'm bringing in the private sector. Private schools will now participate fully in the free senior high school program. Your reaction to this?
Well, I think my understanding of what the deputy minister said is that it's not going to be this year. It's going to be next year,
right.
Not next academic year, next year, which is next 2 academic years. I am aware that, and I'm saying that because it appears that there was some miscommunication over there. I'm aware that the government has been involved in talks with the Private Schools Association on that proposal. And I think it is cogent. It is cogent in the sense that the private schools have the capacity to absorb up to about 150,000 students, And if government is struggling to find funds to complete ongoing senior high school expansion projects, including abandoned ones, in order to end double track, and private schools have spaces sitting there, I think that it makes sense, in the short to medium term, for government to take advantage of that space, provided that government is focusing on providing support to the students and not to the school. Because the focus here is the Ghanaian students who must enjoy secondary education and not necessarily the private school. So we have recommended to government that if it cares, a voucher system should be considered as one of the approaches where you give a voucher worth the same amount of money you are paying for a student who is in a public secondary school. So if government is spending 2,000 Ghana cedis on a public day secondary school student, you give a voucher to the same student if they select a private day secondary school. And then if they want to top up, they top up. So I think that it makes sense for government to collaborate with the private schools, make use of existing infrastructure, and then use it to end the double track in the medium term, in the short to medium term. In the long term, we should complete all ongoing projects and then make sure that our secondary education system is able to absorb all the within the public space.
Mr. Kofiasa, thank you so much. Let me allow Justice Ken Esel, is General Secretary of the Association of Private Schools. Mr. Esel, this must be good news for you. At least you get some dedicated funding from government. If you can unmute for me, Mr. Esel, so we can hear you. Hello, Mr. Esel. Well, we'll get his attention and bring him back on so that we can have this conversation. But we are talking about government decision to bring in the private schools to also take part in the free SHS program, and we are told that this will start somewhere next year. Yes, Mr. Esel, I can hear you now. So,
yes. This is great news to our members. I mean, we're expecting government to keep to their word. The promise they gave us that they were going to include private the free SHS. I think that is something that we have always looked forward to. We want to also say that this should give us also the opportunity to prove that we have always had a niche in trying to handle students that otherwise might find difficulty in going through the public school system. By and large, yes, we will still say that even in the past, there were some private school students who prefer to go to private schools because of double track system. And so eventually when that is phased out, it will bring a lot of relief to our parents, because what we are talking about right now, apart from the schools, is to care about their children and their future. And with the selection process, Kofi has just nailed it properly. The governance system should rest with the implementers and not with the ministry, so that we don't have a situation where we had in the past where the minister who was supposed to be playing oversight responsibility will become the one hijacking the placement. And there are many things that were not too fine with the process, with the system before. We could just make it better. Let me once more say a big thank you to the minister for the good news that has been brought to us.
But I just want to understand, has there been any meeting between the private schools and government to work out the modalities? What are the fine details that you've committed yourself to?
So there have been some engagement with the minister and then also with the Ghana Education Service. And we got assurance. What we'll be doing, what actually we are still working on right now is to agree on how much, like the Kofi said, what would be the voucher? What would it be like for students who are going to private schools? Are they going to bear the full cost of their tuition in the private sector, or they're going to give them equivalent of what they give to their public counterparts? Those are the fine lines we want to look at. Then concerning our selection process, we've come this way before, where you do the pre-selection before the examination. Then the thought that after writing your papers, you have a better idea as to whether you want to go to a category A school or a B or C, depending on your performance, wasn't a bad idea. So we consider selection before and after. When a child finishes writing his BECE and realizes that, I think that I'll be better off if I chose a comfortable C school than to struggle, I think it will give them the opportunity to make a better selection. We welcome the idea that, yes, we cannot do these selections without the consent of the children, and that's what we do in the private sector. We wait for better days and
then finally, I mean, you for the first time we're receiving quite a large number of students. You have the facilities to accommodate them.
Oh yes. There are quite a number of good private schools in the country. Yes, quite about 150. Comparing that to overcrowding public schools, which will be better. About 721 schools are in the private sector, with almost 500,000 BECE candidates. Can you imagine the kind of load that is being placed on these few public schools? And so once we have schools, and we have got equally very good schools, why not? We might not have the perfect situation in the beginning, but it will, as we move along, will improve, because efficiency will never be excellent, but will improve and give the children a better kind of service.
All right, we'll leave it here for now. Justice King ACL is General Secretary of the Ghana Association of Private Schools.